Designing virtual experiences in Rec Room is an awesome thing, and there's a lot to designing a virtual experience. But in today's discussion, we'll delve into the artistic aspect and layout considerations when creating a virtual space. Building an experience in Rec Room heavily relies on applying key level design principles encompassing layout, environmental storytelling, artistic style, establishing the world's atmosphere, and a lot more. Today, we're joined by our guests here who are highly skilled at crafting awe-inspiring spaces. They excel in creating intimate layouts, skillfully employing composition, and expertly layering objects. They're exceptional at handling foreground, middle ground, and background elements, results in unforgettable experiences, guys. And I'm so happy to have them here. I would like to welcome Ace the Builder, Peanut, Angel. Kind. So if you guys haven't heard about these creators, you definitely probably played their rooms, and I highly recommend subscribing to them. They're absolutely fantastic and amazing artists here in Rec Room. All right, thank you guys so much for joining us here today. Would you guys like to say anything quickly to the audience?
Yeah,
Hey
thanks for having us here. Yeah.
Hi! Yeah. Yeah, we're so excited to be here, and I'm just thrilled to have these amazing artists here on this panel. We're going to learn a lot from them today. All right, to kick things off, I want to acknowledge that while there's a wealth of information on designing virtual spaces with a focus on moderation, interaction, there's a notable gap in resources for integrating art and community social design into a virtual experiences. And that is what we're going to be exploring today. So I'm very excited to have these great artists here. We're going to delve right into all of those things. But first, we're going to get started with our very first question, which is, which room have you worked on that holds a special place in your heart? And what makes it your favorite? We're going to start off with Laura today. Go ahead. And we'll just work down the, yeah.
I think my favorite would be Rec Room Karaoke. It's a lot different from what most people know us for, but it was just so much fun to make. I can't say that I really had a plan when it came to designing it. At the time, I had really bad COVID, and I just kind of winged it, and I just sort of went with the flow. And but yeah, it all came together really, really beautifully, and that's when Ost was brought onto the Three of a Kind team as well. And it's just such an amazing room. It means a lot to all of us. Yeah.
It's a beautiful room. There's actually a lot of great design elements in that room, and we'll probably touch base on some of those in this discussion. Absolutely fantastic room.
Thank you.
Whew. Yeah. Peanut, go ahead.
Hey, okay, so I thought about this for a while, and I'm like hard stuck between two of my rooms, and that would be Timber Hollow and Ruins of Stonefall.
My favorites. I love those.
Timber Hollow, I really love Timber Hollow just because it was like a big creative dream of mine. Like I was building upon a lot of the ideas I had when I was a little kid. Like there's tunnels that you can go up like to the second floor, and there's little animals everywhere. It's just like a little kid's dream, and it's very cozy. And then I really also enjoyed Ruins of Stonefall because it kind of kicked off like my real big like creator journey. Like I worked with a team, and there was just so much collaboration involved. There was a little bit of crunch culture, and I just really enjoyed it. It was a huge project between all of us, and we all worked like our absolute hardest. And since it was my idea, it was just amazing to see all those different aspects come together to form like an experience. Like we had programming, we had animation, we hired I think Angle. He did our audio. So we had concept artists, we had like everyone doing everything, and seeing all those pieces come together was like a really beautiful experience that really made me want to pursue game creation as a job beyond Rec Room.
Woo, I love it. I love it. Nice.
All right. For me, I would have to say Room for me is Gravity Pulse Co-op, a room that came out that's been hyped up for like well over a year. It's a 2-player quest. It's a bunch of cool stuff. And working on it with my friend Noodle was it was a long process. We encountered a lot of roadblocks along the way, but we were able to create something that people hold near and dear to their hearts. They enjoyed playing. There's a whole community that we have started, and we're supporting, and people making fan games and all that. And it really just makes me feel like so honored to have been able to make and work on a project that big that it got that level of like a community around it, which was awesome.
That's amazing. Yeah, it was a beautiful room too. Very nice. All right.
Thank you.
Sis.
I think I'm kind of like in between, like with Peanut and stuff. I think it's either Infernius or Vertilis. I think both maps I really went for full work into detail and design and layout. And I think like Vertilis has its way of kind of making everything look lively. It has animations of different characters, which I enjoyed making and kind of coming up with the sound design. There was also Infernius, which I'm just saying, Ruin Subroom still is like, I love it. even though I don't think I could make it much any better even now that it's been like since folklore contest. But oh yeah, those are probably my 2 favorite, which I'm not quite sure on which one might be my favorite.
Wow. No, those are amazing. You're all the rooms you created is just absolutely phenomenal. Wow. All right. If you guys haven't heard of those rooms, I do highly recommend checking them out. They are absolutely fantastic rooms. And now we're going to get started with our next question, which is, what sources of inspiration and methods do you rely on to kickstart your creative process when designing experiences here in Rec Room? We're going to start off with Laura.
There's a lot of things that inspire us, to be honest. One of the main ones is obviously us together as friends, playing other games. It gives us ideas. When it comes to the sort of creative and art side of it, though, I use a lot of things for inspiration. Websites such as Pinterest, or I look at Sketchfab, things like that. There's great resources out there. Yeah, just sort of, we all come together and we do sketches together, or we make mini designs of the map, and we kind of just bounce off each other ideas. This usually takes days and days of just bouncing ideas off each other until we've got a solid idea of what we want to go for, really. And also we reach out to our community a lot. They tell us a lot about maps that they want to see one day from us, and they give us great ideas and inspiration. Especially our Discord community, it's the things that they tell us are great in terms of ideas, and that's usually one of the main inspirations that we use, is the 3 of a kind community. They're just really great at helping us move forward with things.
Woot. Love it. Yeah. All right, Peanut, what's your process?
All right, I'm an ideas person. I have too many ideas. It's a killer thing to have. I love being creative. But yeah, for our teams, usually we have what we call a blue sky phase. And we throw up everything that comes to our mind, everything that could possibly work. There's nothing to criticize. Nothing is a bad idea in the stage. So we like to do this by spawning in like 5 whiteboards, writing whatever we want on it. We like to pull out our maker pen. We like to draw little shapes and create little like layers of elevation to explain like our ideas. And it's just super fun. And then on top of that, I also heavily rely on like Pinterest mood boards to get like ideas for what I want to do. And I really, really do ask everyone, like, you should really get into Pinterest and look at references. Oh yeah, art in references, Oh my
Great.
goodness.
Right.
That's, yeah. Do not be that creator that it's like, oh, I don't want to look at any references. I want everything I do to be original. What you're making is original. Having references to add on to your ideas, like a sundae, is only going to make it so much better. So yeah, that's my advice.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Pinterest is my my place. All right. Ingles.
All right. So, like Peanut, I am a very strong idea person. I have so many ideas floating around my head, and a lot of this, surprisingly, comes through, or not surprisingly, comes through music. Sometimes I'll be listening to a song or something else that like some of my favorite artists or even some of my friends would make, and then I get ideas in my head for like sort of themes or like things that could go along with it, and like start brainstorming a lot through that. That's one part of it, and the other part is just a lot of like messing around and having fun with it. A lot of my recent projects and recent little things that I've been working on has just been me like messing around with things. Like the new throw handle component that came out, I came up with a really cool concept for a cool game that I might do. That was just me messing around like after the update came out. And I think ideas that come naturally through just toying with concepts and stuff like that is a really fun and like it's a very rejuvenating way to create instead of like forcing yourself to like write down ideas or stuff like that. It's very like free form. It's very cool, and I enjoy making things like that.
Woo! Love it. Great. Aces.
I like usually like starting to build something off like movies or like video games, and like half the time I go off like IRL references to kind of like make sure I have an understanding of how things look at like in real life and not just off the reference that someone's made previously, because that kind of like goes down and makes it worse and worse and worse. So you just IRL references are like my main point, and half the time I kind of like have a reference, just like I store them up. And I know there's a website called ArtStation, which is like a hidden gem for me, which I love, like just having a collection. Like I just go on there like every so often, find photos, add them to the collection. And then, yeah, I think, and then you kind of get those references, you build it, and then you can go off that just like on your own. So like, you could just have a singular house that you want to build, and then you could build terrain around that you've seen, like let's say like a 90-degree photo of, or like whatever, which is like what I like usually like to do, not just like complete reference of the whole map, but kind of like do your own original thing as well.
Oh, absolutely. If anybody hasn't actually gone through Aces rooms, they're very cinematic. I do highly recommend walking through those beautiful stories.
Flattered.
Really well done. Absolutely. You should be flattered. All right. We're going to get into our next topic, which is layout and environmental storytelling. Now we'll talk about cinematic. This definitely falls on Ace's plate. But we're going to start off on the first question here. How do you or your team start creating the layout of your experience? Like what is the process of laying out the experience, finalizing the layout? We're going to start with Laura.
So it depends on what kind of game that you wanted to make or room that you wanted to make. But we generally tend to think of the main points that are going to be in the room. For instance, when we made Dare to Sleep, we knew that we wanted a cinematic sort of entrance to start with in a seat. And then we knew roughly where we wanted to have the different tasks. And then we sort of made sure that they were spaced out nicely to give the player time to see all the artwork in the room. And then we sort of build up around that. Yeah.
Beautiful. So a lot of cinematic stuff. So guys, keep them know they're really looking at thinking about how they're laying out the story with their environment, walking that player through that story, moving that player through that story when they're designing their layout. So Peanut, go for it.
Yeah.
We love gray boxes. Uh,
Me too.
we use it, yeah, for Timber Hollow. We use it to define like our peak moments of elevation, terrain, how everything's laid out, where we wanted to put things. It's a great tool for communication between teams because visual communication is always just a step above like auditory. Yeah. And then especially when we got into those more like quest and story based games where we needed to start laying out levels and puzzles, that was crucial because it's just such a huge task. You need to start dividing things more evenly. So we had like Pan Knight, for example. He would do our level design for Ruins of Stonefall, and he would gray box different puzzles that he would come up with. And then us as the artists, without him there, need to be able to interpret these gray boxes and turn them into a fun experience that also matches the aesthetics of the room. So gray boxes are a great way to start your room. They're very simple and easy. Anyone can put together a couple of cubes. So I really recommend doing it. Great communication tool, great level design tool, great way to define elevation. And it's a great way to start your building. If you're one of those people that are like, where do I start making something? Lay out your gray box first and then build on top of that.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. That's great advice. I definitely do a lot of great boxing for sure. So awesome. All right, Ingo, what's your process?
So when it comes to things like designing layouts, I primarily think about like what the environment is supposed to serve as in terms of like the context of the room. For instance, of Gravity Pulse Co-op, a lot of the rooms are like very, like sciencey, white panels on the walls and like, laid out in like specific ways. For a room like that and for stuff like Ruins of Stonefall as well, I think a lot about where the player would naturally want to go and like where they would look first, where they would think. So like oftentimes you wouldn't like put something on the roof because not many people look up at the roof. That's something I learned a hard way in one of the rooms. But yeah, a lot of it just comes down to making sure that when I lay stuff out or like when I gray box, everything that needs to be seen by the player is able to be seen, and everything that looks like something can be interacted with or something that could like have any sort of like thing that the player can interact with at all, it's visible and it's present, and they can actually, they know what to do without having to be told, through lines of dialogue or signs and stuff like that. So doing stuff like that and making sure that things are communicated well between the player and the room itself is a very good thing, and that's something that I tend to do a lot.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Isis.
I'm like entirely with Peanut here. We usually like start off with like base layout of where the player's gonna walk, trees, like terrain, buildings, and whatsoever. And I feel like just by doing that, it gives like a great visual representation of what you're trying to create in the first place. So it might end up sparking more ideas, and then you've got a full map suddenly. So I feel like that's like a great point of starting a map just in general.
Woo! Exactly. So we did get a couple of questions asking what is gray boxing, and gray boxing is laying out your map just with a bunch of boxes, planning out where the buildings are, planning out how the path is going to lead the player through. Is just planning out the overall experience, not necessarily thinking about details, just basic shapes, laying out where all the art and all the different little objects that players interact with going through the experience. So that's what that is. All right. So we're going to go to our next question. When crafting an experience, do you consider the player's initial starting point? How do you approach guiding players through the journey when starting to create a room layout? Kind of touched a bit about this, but we're going to go more into details. All right, we're going to start with Laura.
Yeah, so you have to think about your player's point of view. You don't want that to be too confusing or overwhelming when they first join the room. And a good thing, sometimes people forget to stop flying. You have to remember to stop flying and stand in that point, and you have to see it from their perspective and keep checking back on it. But a great way to sort of guide them through as well. We like to use subtle lighting as well to guide them through to the next spot. But yeah, always try and think about their point of view, and just stand and think about how they're going to see it. And we always, I like to sort of leave the room just for a little bit and come back with like fresh eyes as well. That tends to help. If you're in the room a lot, you see it a lot better if you sort of leave and come back. But that, you've got to remember that that's the first thing they're going to see, and you have to make a really good impression. So it's one of the most important places to think of.
Yeah, exactly. And to expand a little bit on that, Laura makes really scary rooms, and lighting is a big influence on her rooms. And just by the presentation, when a player spawns into the room, they really see a grand composition, and then they're led through that composition. It almost feels a little bit like Disneyland, but very scary. Just gonna say, scary. Scary Disneyland.
I take that as a compliment.
Yes. All right. Pina, go for it.
All right. When it comes to that spawning location, it really depends what kind of game we're looking for. Like in Ruins of Stonefall, we embraced clarity. Like we wanted to have a clear path for our players to follow so they could find their next objective. Even if these paths somehow got narrower and wider, narrower, and we just wanted to make sure that our players weren't getting lost or confused. We also use a lot of subtle lighting to illuminate places and objectives so players knew where they were going. And then for more laid back rooms like Timber Hollow, like from my spawning point of Timber Hollow, like kind of like Laura did, I did a lot of standing where the player was like spawning in just to see, okay, what am I seeing? So in Timber Hollow, what I wanted to do is I had a path, and then once you walked up through that path, like a little path in the woods, you could see like everything. There's a path going here, a path going here, a path going to the side, and then also there was another path going to the left. So you could choose all these different paths. We wanted to give these players and like evoke a sense of like adventure in them, and we wanted to give them as many options as possible, and also that big awe moment of them walking through that forest and then being able to see like, look at all the things that I can do. So just having like a good first impression full of lots of opportunities, filling that player's head with adventure and like just being ready to go out and see what there is to do is just a great point of starting.
Absolutely. And I wanted to expand on that a little bit about that room. One of the things about what makes it my favorite is that the spaces are different. You're not walking into like a consistent height in the space. The space overall has different heights and elevation, which creates a little bit, it gives a little bit more adventure, as you were talking about, Peanut. And it just keeps people around in these little circle areas, these little communication areas that you created. So keep in mind when you're creating spaces, having a consistent space is a little bit boring. And then creating different heights in your space keeps things very interesting. All right, Engel.
My philosophy with this is that I like to think of when you first join the room, the first few seconds is kind of like a YouTube thumbnail. If they get this picture of what the room looks like and what they can expect. If the player can't really decipher what's going to happen in the room or like what the vibe is in the first few seconds of them joining, looking around and like seeing everything and taking everything and processing it, then it becomes kind of difficult to enjoy the room or be confused about what to do next. So a lot of what I like to do is to show players like a defined path to whatever that they're going to do in the room. But at the same time, I like to give players like the freedom to explore, because I feel like exploration within rooms, it varies between what kind of a room, but exploration in general is just fun because you can find little, cool little art bits or, cool little things to interact with. And I think that's valuable.
Yeah, definitely. You played a lot of your rooms encompass a lot about what Laura and Pina actually create in their rooms as well. And you create a lot of interesting mechanics. And what mechanics we call in game design is like ingredients. And you have a lot of fun ingredients within your rooms
Yeah.
that kind of lead players in different directions. Awesome stuff. Aces, go for it.
I feel like the best thing, like when creating a room, is making the player like go like wow. So it's like not revealing a view or like a sub room right on their starting point, but to make them go like up a hill or around a corner, or just make it like hit them all at once. So there's also like level design, such as like making different levels and layers and onto the map to really make the player explore. For example, like going through buildings, climbing out windows, exploring through caves and like lakes can also like really enhance like the player's immersion.
Yes, I just love that in a lot of your rooms. They have a lot of that. It's actually one of my favorites. Yeah, so we're gonna touch base a little bit more on that in our next question here. Okay, hold on. Okay, yeah. I observed that in many of your rooms, you incorporate different levels of elevation in your experiences. Could you share your thought process behind designing those design choices? Start with you, Laura.
Yeah, so I'll talk about, I guess, our hangouts, like karaoke or our rooftop bar. I feel like if it's all just on one flat layer, it can the whole experience in itself can feel a little bit flat. And I feel like breaking it up. So with the Three Oak rooftop bar, you spawn into the room, and straight away you've got this conservatory which takes your eye straight down to the main area. But we also have different areas that cut off in up and down, downwards to the fire pit, upwards to the piano, and then surrounding it all there's a balcony around it all. And I think it's great for people to feel that they feel like they can break off with their friends and create more intimate, cozy settings for them. So for hangouts, I think it's really important to have different levels of elevation. The same with karaoke, how there's the double-decker bus you can chill in there, or there's the cafe area and the booths. And it just makes for such a more interesting, intimate feeling in a room. But you can do the same thing with like horrors and quests, especially quests. You want to break off in different directions, and that those layers are really important to make it feel more immersive and just more exciting, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. So I just want to like expand a little bit on that. Like Laura really emphasizes on the elevation in the room, especially like creating little stairways that go up on elevation, go down on elevation, creating little small spaces, but still it still feels a part of the overall experience, but still helps break up those individual areas so that allows people to group up and expand out. Very cool. Nice stuff. Peanut, go for it. Yeah.
All right. As you know, elevation plays an incredibly important role in my room creation, especially in Timber Hollow. And I really think it's because elevation is just such a fun element. Like when we were little kids, one of our favorite things to do is go climb on things, be high up, go do things in a composition that's different than we see in everyday life. Like IRL, in real life, it's just, we don't really see that very often. We don't get to go climb things. It's impractical. But in a game setting, we can really take these childish like motivations and then bring them into a game where there are no restrictions. There's no like, we're not gonna get hurt if we fall. Like there's no fall damage. So we can really embrace that kind of stuff. So in Timber Hollow, there's things to do above you and there's things to do in front of you. And that really adds a lot to the room while also making it more visually pleasing to look at. So in Timber Hollow, there's zip lines you can go on, and on those zip lines, there are tree hangouts that you can hang out on, and then there are huge spaces that you can sit and you can observe the whole map and get away from people to have more private and intimate conversations between people and hang out. So that's just a very important part of an experience. And then also in our second subroom, we have creative ways to get up. So there's like tunnels that you can go up to move elevations and get to the same location, and there's stairs. So there's lots of different ways, and it kind of brings in, again, this like feeling of being adventurous and to choose your own path. And then on top of that, it adds just so much, goodness, what's the word? It's like utility to the room, because now players, not only do they have this fun, adventurous way to move throughout the room, but we also cut down their travel time in half, because now players can jump down to meet each other so much quicker than it would have been if we just used the path to disconnect players in a room. So it really brings people together, it brings the room together, it cuts down on your space, it makes your space more interesting. Elevation is something that everyone should have for both aesthetic purposes and just for environmental purposes as well.
Amazing. Great examples. Love that. All right, Ingo, go for it.
So for me, I have a sort of like personal sort of feeling with elevation in terms of just like how it impacts the player and like how they view it. I live kind of close to New York City, so naturally I get to be surrounded by these really tall skyscrapers and like these vast sort of like cityscapes. So a lot of that sort of resonates with me well, and a lot of the rooms that I have been a part of where I've been working on art design incorporate a good chunk of elevation, whether it be places that players can actually go to, so climbing up higher to get like a higher vantage point, or just being in like a space where there's so much elevation where it feels much larger than like the world, and it feels overbearing, but not to the point where it's like anxiety inducing, but it feels like, you know, like there's a bigger world. And a lot of that is just a great feeling to have. It feels cool to be like a part of something larger. And yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Sis, go for it.
I think in Vitilis, we really tried to go for, in most of the subrooms, exploration more than just kind of like go across a flat floor for like 5 seconds and boom, you're in a loading screen. So we really wanted to make it so then, you know, go into a building, go up ladders, you know, down, drop down, go everywhere, like, and can really like improve like a player's experience just from even just that. Like even just like going into a building can like, you know, be a big part of the map, and just like expanding that amount of time in that sub room, you know, can, you know, it's, you know, a good part of making a sub room.
Exactly. I just wanted to expand a little bit on that. So like, if you've ever been through ACES's rooms, they're very somatic, as we mentioned before, but as you're walking through them, there are high levels of balconies, windows from above that really open up different little areas. You can't necessarily go to them, but you get to see them, and they help break up spaces and capture your eye and lead players through an experience. It's really well done. I do highly recommend going through like all of his rooms to actually view all of that. It's really great. Okay, awesome stuff. We're going to go on to our next question, which is actually kind of an important topic. What are your thoughts on the pros and cons of creating a different types of spaces in virtual maps, such as an intimate space, which is a small space, compared to a larger map layouts? What are the complications? What are the pros and cons? What do you guys recommend? Let's start off with Laura.
So yeah, there's pros and cons to both, and that again I think would depend on the type of map that you're wanting to create. Sometimes maps can be far too vast, where you feel a sort of disconnect between other people in the room, and there's not those layers of elevation between to break it up. But then again, when rooms are slightly too small, you can feel a little bit claustrophobic and a little bit overwhelming, especially if you don't have the room capacity of players turned down a little bit. But it really just depends on the type of room that you wanting to create, and how you layer up in between those large spaces. And if you are making a small intimate space, really think about accessibility with players. Make sure that you're not crashing into things and banging into each other. Make sure there's clear pathways, and your play capacity is correct. Yeah.
Yeah. I always find that your maps are usually very intimate. They're very small spaces, but they have a lot in them that kind of like really draw your attention. But there's like layers out in the distance that you can see that kind of like break up the space a little bit more. That kind of expands that map, but it's still very intimate. It feels very, very cozy, but scary. Always. Her maps are very scary, guys. Just saying.
Cozy but scary.
Very, very scary. Disneyland scary, guys. Disneyland, but scary Disneyland. All right. Peanut.
All right. Well, when it comes to map spaces, I like to incorporate just a little bit of both. So in Timber Hollow, we have this big central space where there's picnic tables, and it connects you to all the smaller intimate spaces in a room. And we also use that composition for our next subroom, because honestly, it is just the best composition to have a nice open space and then have that break up into like a circular like area where people can go hang out more intimately. And not just in the context of hangouts, but this can also be applied to other rooms, such as Runes of Stonefall, which is a quest room. We'd have very intimate like hallways and corridors where we break off vision using foliage, and we'd bring players to more open spaces, but that still had smaller objectives. And these areas would open up so that we could give the player a sense of awe. Maybe we'd have an elephant walking through and it looks like there's lots of open space, but we keep our player focused on our objective, which is in our next intimate space. And we do this through lighting, and we do this through dynamic elements such as like buttons that we can interact with. So that's just kind of how we give our players like a sense of freedom and openness while also keeping them focused on lots of the smaller intimate things to do. Also keeping these larger spaces and using them very sparingly. Like we only really want 1 or 2 of these per subroom, no more, because they can get very overwhelming and they can become too much space. It's good for a nice awe moment, but you don't need 3 more awe moments after that.
No, I just love a lot of the rooms that you create, Peanut. Like the spaces that you create are phenomenal. If anybody wants to learn about space or create really great spaces, you have to go through Peanut's rooms. They're really, really well done. You'll learn a lot from them. I would sit there and study them if I were you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, Angle, go for it.
Okay, so I often play with the concepts of having intimate and then more larger spaces, and oftentimes it's very fun to have like a contrast between the two, like Peanut said, to have like an awe moment for players to go through, and it's very fun to play with the concept of switching between them. Of course, you don't want to overdo with the large spaces, but you don't want to overdo with the small spaces because they can feel too cramped and feel too close in. So a lot of the rooms that I've worked on, they have a very nice blend of having open spaces where people can gather together or talk or interact with each other, but then there's more secluded areas that are more intimate where people can go and talk, or they can have conversations and other sort of things like that. One room that comes to mind is Evermore for the Solstice contest. That room, while it also played very well with elevation, there was a lot of like sort of playing with those sort of spaces where there's this one, like the big sort of room that you're in, the big circular room, but there's also little tiny spaces where you can go, like behind curtains or like little carpets or just little corners of the room that are split up. And altogether, it brings players together, but also keeps them, if they want to be, separate, so that they could do their own thing.
Yeah, same here, guys. If you ever really want to study space, and I do highly recommend studying spaces, especially if you're creating in Rec Room, you need to check out Engel's rooms as well. They are fantastic experiences. And one of my most favorite experiences is Cyberhop. I love Cyberhop. And I love Evermore too. Evermore is amazing, and you just mentioned that too. It's very good rooms. I do highly recommend taking a look. All right, Isis, you want to go for it?
I feel like having a large and diverse map can lead to like massive ink limits, and so like you're limited to how much detail you can have in a map if you know make it too large and expansive. So like on the other hand, you can have like small layouts, but it will limit like the amount of freedom a player can have, like exploration and all that. So I usually like mix of the two, and you know you have enough exploration to add that freedom aspect, but it's small enough to add like enough detail for it to be like still like wow.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely very true. All right, guys, we're gonna skip our next question because we are actually, gonna run out of time. So we love this talk. This talk is amazing. All right. So I just want to say this is one of my favorite topics, layout design and environmental storytelling right here. This is very important. Now that we've learned some new techniques here, and I would highly recommend going and studying all these rooms. I want to say that we need to jump into the art style, and we're going to start talking about that topic. And that's a fun topic, and we all love this topic, especially all these creators are amazing at this. So we're going to start off with our first question on that. When you first start a project, what is your process for landing on a style for the project? After laying out everything, what is your process of laying on the style? What advice would you give to other creators when they are trying to pick a style? Let's start off with Laura.
What I always try to think of is what sort of emotion or feeling you want to evoke onto the player. So with sort of when we made Silent Hill Origins of Evil, I wanted it to feel very enclosed and very detailed. So even with the prop design of everything, I wanted everything to be intricately detailed to feel as immersive as possible. The more you're immersed into an environment, the more scary it can be. But then again,
Very scary.
So like with Dare to Sleep, I wanted to portray a young child's sort of dream, nightmare state. So everything was kind of topsy-turvy and twisted and kind of simplistic in ways. So try not to sort of fixate on one style. Try and be open to trying different styles of building, whether it's low poly or cartoony or detailed. Just depends on the room and what sort of feeling you want to give to the player when they play the room. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I'm just going to expand on Silent Hill here. I screamed in that room, just saying. That room was scary. That pulled me into the TV, and that was like another experience that I never want to experience again. Saying. Oh. All right, go ahead, Peanut.
All right, I'm a style person. A lot of people know me for my style. I tend to gravitate towards a lot more like organic shapes and whatnot. It's one of my favorite parts of building is like making something and then having people recognize my work. It's like a signature almost. And people ask me all the time, like, can you please teach me how to build in your style? But I really think that style is something that we all need to develop as our own signature. So I always tell people to try and practice on their own. Kind of like how Asia said, using real world examples and then creating them how you would like to see them. That's a great way of creating style. Now, when it comes to doing a project with people, a lot of people assume like they're working with me, then they're using my style for the most part. Unless I'm helping out on someone else's project, then you need to learn to be adaptive and being able to observe something and know exactly how it's made. And that's just something that comes with a lot of practice, is learning how to shift between soft edges and hard edges and how we portray real world elements. It's all subjective. So just making sure that you're able to both create and embrace your own style while also being able to mimic other people's style will help bring in a lot of unity to your room. And that always feels better when the room feels like it was made by one collective creative person rather than 8 different people with different ideas of how to build a tree.
I love it. That's beautiful. That was beautiful. Well said. All right, Engel, go for it.
Again, like the others have said, it does depend on the room that you're making. Some rooms are just better if like the concept is just better to land on one specific style than another. There's a lot of sort of, I guess, talk with the groups that I've worked with, a lot of talk about style and like overall aesthetic and vibe that the room would give off to the player. So like how I mentioned before, the sort of like the first few seconds when a player joins the room is immediately what they remember the room by, usually. So when I think about that, I think about usually styles that are either detailed enough to where they are, very nice to look at and they leave like a sort of memory in your brain, or they're unique enough so they use a lot of different types of vibrant colors and stuff like that. One room that pops in my head is Lavender Haze. A lot of very nice purple and like blue colors in that room. It was a very pretty room to look at. And I remember going into the room for the first time and I was like, wow, this is a really, really pretty room. It immediately caught my attention and all that stuff. And so, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Great examples. Great examples. Isis.
I think what I usually do is I try to do something different from the last map that I've made. So like I've went from a dark and hellish style to like a colorful and happy. Or like you even mix 2 in 1. So like I know like recently me and my group wanted to make like a silly and goofy map that revolved around not just the gameplay but the funny costumes and cartoony but detailed like environment. And I know in Vitilis, I really wanted when custom colors came out, I really wanted to, try and use it as much as possible inside of the terrain. So I had like different colors on the trees, on the ground, like, and everything. And even the lighting was all, pink shade. And 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 you couldn't really know which way to go because there were just so many different, drop down, go upstairs, go in a building. We had to create signs that would have arrows on them, which could kind of even though that a player wouldn't fully see that unless if they were looking closely, kind of their brain would kind of know that they're supposed to go down there, and you can kind of tell, you can guide the player through the whole subroom without them even knowing that they're being guided through the subroom.
Oh my gosh, I can't express how much I've seen so much of that in your room. Just the amount of trees dropped on the ground that you have to walk across, and then the animations that you create in your room that kind of pull something down like a tree, unblocking a direction that you're supposed to go is really well done. It's just you create great direction in your rooms. I do highly, again, recommend going through those. Okay, so we're about almost out of time, and we're gonna just go off to this one other question. Once the experience is almost complete, once you put it all together, we did the map layout, we did the artistic style, and now we're putting this all together. Once the experience is almost complete, what is your process for incorporating sound, lighting, music, and even ambience into your scene? So we're gonna start off with that.
Yeah, so one of my favorite things to do is when a room's almost finished and you can get to polishing it all up. But lighting is something that I really enjoy doing. It adds so much depth to the room. It makes it feel so much more real. I like to work with a complete sort of pitch black dark skybox so that I have real control. When it's a dark map, of course, real control over the lighting. I like to draw the player's eye to certain things, and ambient sound is really important. That can also lead players to certain paths to take, or it can feel so much more immersive. Just the sound of floorboards creaking, or the sound of footsteps in grass, things like that are really important. But yeah, lighting is so much fun to play with. I can't stress how important it is to really make your room pop, make your artwork pop. You think it looks amazing, but then you add the correct lighting to it, and it just really can look outstanding. But you have to also keep in mind people on all platforms. You have to think about how it will look for everyone. But yeah, that's one of my favorite things to do is the lighting element.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. Lighting is a really important tool to highlight, create contrast, and direct players within your room. All right, Peanut, go for it.
Yeah, when it comes to that kind of ambience and putting on those final touches, what becomes really important is the tone of the room, and we can achieve this in so many different ways. One of my favorite ways to do this is through color and through lighting, because, for example, in Timber Hollow, we have very dark purples and greens. It's very calm and smooth, and the blue. So we just kind of want to give these players these feelings of relaxation and ability to do whatever they want. They're in no danger. But then in contrast, when we look at rooms like Ruins of Stonefall, in certain rooms, I would use red, and everything would be red. The walls would all be lit with red because there's lava. And that really adds a lot of the danger and the adrenaline that we're looking for from these players. And it really sets the mood and how we want them to feel when they play our game. And also, music is just such a huge, important detail of this. And I know Engel knows this more than anyone. We've hired him to do so many soundtracks for us at this point. But we would literally take him into a room, show him all the different lighting and stuff. We would tell him what we wanted the players to feel. And then he would try to create music that also implies this tone. And that can also really heighten the experience as well, having both music and color to imply tone. That just really adds a whole nother layer to your rooms.
Yeah, it really brings the space alive. All right, Engel, go for it.
So, like Peanut was saying, because I focus a lot more on music and stuff and sound design in general, I take all of that into very much mind. So like in Ruins of Stonefall, when I was composing all of the music for it, I thought about all the spaces, about what it would sound like and what the sort of tone would sort of match. So for Ruins of Stonefall, he was very sort of like cinematic, but also still very like sort of like earthy and kind of like very natural sort of sounds. So like a lot of like percussion and like, you know, like some bongos and some like little tambourines and all that stuff. And for stuff like Gravity Pulse Co-op, where it's a lot pretty different atmosphere, I would use a lot more of like, you know, synthesizers and a lot more of like droney sort of sounds, like, you know, more heavy hitting drums and things like that to sort of give the sense of like, oh yeah, you know, like this is a very sciencey place and like, you know, it's a bit more impressive and stuff like that. And also for like sound design, I enjoy thinking about like where sounds come from and like how they would resonate in a room and like how they would sound from far away. I just love sound designing in Rec Room. It's a very intuitive process to me. But yeah.
I know. It's beautiful. Bringing sounds to your rooms are very important, and Angle does a great job of that. All right, Isis, go for it. Yeah.
I like to have like a wide variety of sounds. So this could go from the ambience of distant birds tweeting or the blowing wind through the trees. Like you can even have 3D audio of rocks falling, water dripping in an echoey cave. Like all these like different bits can really add that type of immersion. And like even music also really helps like build up mystery or like tension and can really set a mood, like the mood of the map. And lighting can also, you know, really, that's like the main point of a whole entire map. That can change the course of any bit of detail, any bit of anything. Like I know I went in one of my maps and I accidentally deleted one of the like sky dome and like lighting. And, oh my god, I'm like, what is this? This is ugly. So it's like you lighting is absolutely everything. I usually like to start with the lighting before I build absolutely anything, just to know exactly where the shadows are, where, you know, or like it can also like boost your like motivation on finishing a map if it's looking better than with bad lighting. But it can also kind of make you happy when you put in that lighting and it's like, whoa, this is amazing now.
Absolutely. Like I want to expand on a little bit on that. Like lighting is so important. It creates direction. We know that because we've already kind of sparkled that in our past conversations here. And world lighting, creating your direction of like where you want the player to see, like if it's the moon in the distance or if it's the shadows pointing players into that direction. It's really great way to start actually thinking about early on in the process. Awesome. Thank you so much for bringing that up. All right, we are up on time, guys. Wow, it's great to hear all of these different ways of working and seeing everything come together. This talk has been amazing. I hope this panel has been helpful for many of you. And I hope this really helped out with helping you design your experiences. Now, just keep in mind, like, you know, want to start laying out your maps, create lots of mock-ups of your maps. Gray boxing is very important in level design. And then you want to think about color and style and bringing that all together with your team. And then think about the art style and then bringing in all these lights and fixtures to help direct your players through your experience. So elevation is very important, color is very important, and direction is very important. So keep that in mind when building your maps. Thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you, all these amazing creators. I do highly recommend subscribing to them. You should subscribe and join all their rooms because they're really good. Study their rooms if you are a creator. Go in and study them. Walk in with your friends, talk about the differences, and learn from them because they have really great experiences. All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.